Hey everybody, Father Bob and Arlo. Welcome to the South Campus show. And this week our guest is parishioner Rich Beller. Rich, welcome.
Glad to be here, Father.
All right, thank you.
I don't know what you've done to deserve this, but
Well,
I hope
I'll tell you one
works
thing.
out.
I like the hat, for one. I'm going to start with that. And
Okay.
the get up, we're going to get into that. Rich, you've been part of the parish 20 years plus, you and Betty. Betty
Yes.
passed on some time ago, and here you are. You keep on doing what you're doing. You do it well. You are a cowboy poet laureate. You are St. Victoria's Cowboy Poet Laureate. I give you that title, all right? But explain what cowboy poetry is.
Well, I've got to explain, first of all, that I am not a cowboy poet writer. I am a cowboy poet reciter.
Reciter.
And there's two groups of people. There's the writers who some will recite, but many of them are poor reciters because they don't put a lot of animation or gesture or whatever into the recitation when they recite the poem.
Yeah.
And reciters are a little more loose, and they seem to put in a little.
They
more
have the
action.
rapport with the
Yes.
audience.
Yes.
The writers have the kind of genius to put it together. It's kind of like my work. I'm a writer and a reciter every Sunday. I write some stuff up and then I recite it to the people. It's called a homily, and sometimes I do better than others. But
And people like it
yeah.
so much they even offer money, in the collection. So that's a great.
Do I
thing.
dare say I wish it was more? No, people are that other parishes, they're very generous here at St. Victoria. But so I have heard of poetry. Until I met you, Rich, I'd never heard of cowboy poetry. How did you get interested, and what is it?
Well, it's quite a story, really. About 25 years ago, well, maybe not quite that long, 23, 24 years ago, the Winter Texan Park that we were staying at in Mission, Texas, all of those parks have weekly entertainment. And they have to have somebody that produces it, gets it together. And the people that had it for 4 or 5 years, and they wanted out. And they kept talking to me and Betty about getting involved in producing an entertainment. I had no idea what to do. I hadn't the slightest idea of where to find these entertainers and so forth, but they said they would help me some, and they did, and we agreed to take it on. And they have a showcase down there every year of entertainers who have come down to the valley that want to entertain. And one of them happened to be from Kerrville, Texas, a guy by the name of Dennis Gaines, who was a cowboy poet, writer, and an excellent reciter.
Right.
And I booked him for a show, and as he's doing this show, I'm thinking, man, that would be kind of fun if I could do something like that, but no, I don't have time for it. I'd never be able to do it.
Sure.
But it was that planted the seed, and then it was a year or two later, had two people the same year as entertainers at Fiesta Village. One was a Western song singer, and he had a special shtick. He would involve the story behind the story. It was a very interesting way of presenting his program. And he also recited some cowboy poetry. And another guy by the name of Rod Erickson, who was from Spirit Lake, Idaho. The first guy, Terry Raff, he was from Kuski, Idaho. Well, Rod would throw in some cowboy poetry, and I'm thinking, well, that's really the interest is kind of growing.
Yeah.
And as they were getting ready to go back to Idaho at the end of the season, we were having lunch, Terry and his wife, Rod and Nancy and Betty and I, having lunch at a pizza place called Seatsies in McAllen. And we got to visiting about one thing to another. And Rod Erickson said, Rich, you ought to get involved in cowboy poetry. You've got a good voice for it. You got a good stage presence. And Terry Raff spoke up and he said, I think that's a good idea. You ought to do that. And I said, guys, I don't know anything about it. I don't know where to start. Nancy said, well, I'll send you a couple of poems. And that was the start of it.
Well, it's interesting. The seed was planted, you saw it, and then you got the encouragement from other people like we think you could do this, and they took them up on it, and got going. So
and Betty was my real coach. She was
Okay.
the one that just
wow, kind of your
Kept it-
cheerleader and
yeah.
supporter. Great. What makes cowboy poetry as opposed to other
Well,
genres of poetry?
It's poetry that's really down to earth kind of poetry. It can be very serious. It can be very humorous. It can be a combination of serious and humorous within the same poem. But it's everyday living. It's about nature. It's about the West. It's about God.
Mm-hmm.
And a combination of all those, and it's just kind of down to earth, kind of easy to understand poetry.
Yeah. In my business, we call that it's laced with spirituality. You know, God's present in all of it. It's seriously. So, do you want to give us a few verses of something? I don't want to put you on the spot, but you got one in you?
Well, maybe one or two.
Okay.
If I'm in good shape, we've got about 45. We don't have time for that.
Okay.
Well, I had this team of horses once, the best for miles around. Well matched in conformation, Lord, how they could work the ground. One of them was stolen on a dark and stormy night. I never found that thief, though I searched with all my might. Now, my wife being a Christian, she said to me one day, "You want your team back together? You could get down and pray." Well, I figured maybe she was right. So I prayed, of course. And sure enough, that thief came back and stole my other horse.
I wasn't sure where that was going, but you surprised me.
I never rode a bucking horse that spurred his ornery hide. I've never roped a wild steer. I've never even tried.
Keep going.
I've never fixed a windmill or lots of other stuff, but I could have been a cowboy, because I'm darn sure dumb enough.
You know, it's kind of like jokes. One begs another, right?
That's right.
Oh man, there's a certain folksiness about it and a whimsicalness that kind of draws you in, and it's down to earth. It's got some humor, and it makes a point. You
Yeah.
know?
There's
In a good way.
a saying among entertainers, and I'm sure it's the same thing among pastors. When you feel like you've got the audience in your hand, and if you're connecting well with your audience, you will get that feeling. And when you got them in your hand, that's when you really get on a roll. And I'll bet you've experienced that too.
No comment. On occasion, I'll ask people. Maybe I feel it, but or, the others. But I totally agree. It's our message, but connecting with our audience as we give the message. And there's a mutuality in that, and then there's an energy in that, and you can feel it from the listener, and it's fun. It's really
there's a
how we-
connection there.
Yeah.
And of course, the amount of the time that you're doing it in, they say that 7 minutes is about the average person's concentration time, that they will listen carefully. If you go much beyond 7 minutes, not saying that your homilies are longer than 7 minutes, Father,
I'm listening closely.
but if
Rich.
they are, they're interested.
That is a
Anyway.
good piece of advice. I found that myself, and I heard it at 6 minutes. You got to say it in 6. And after that, pack up your lunch and go home. But it's sometimes it is longer. But it's an art form, and you have stage presence. Just listening to you kind of drew me in, and there's you're down to earth, like the material you're talking about, and it's a great message.
Well, I come from a farm background, born and raised on a farm in west central Ohio near the Indiana border, and we were just ordinary people,
Yeah.
and that never really changed.
Ordinary people can communicate best to ordinary people. That's what I think. But Rich, you're so vibrant and alive and so on. You want to tell the folks how old you are? Maybe I'm putting you on the spot there.
Well, the good Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise too high. Come July 15 of this year, I'll be 92 years old.
92, not bad, folks. I'll tell you what. I'm taking after you. I want to take the Geritol you're taking. Rich, we've got a question we call from the magic orange hat. Take it and let's see. Take a swipe at this one. This is the impromptu part of the interview.
It says board game. Oh, I've got it backwards here, haven't I? What person from history would you have enjoyed knowing? Oh, that's an interesting question, and there are so many people. I would go clear back to the time of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln.
Which one?
Probably Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
He was a very wise person, far beyond most people's understanding, I think. And he was the president of this country at the right time to bring the country back together.
That's right.
And without him, I don't know where we would be today, to be honest with you.
Yeah. He was a folksy kind of guy like you are, Rich. Thank you for joining us, and keep doing your cowboy poetry. We hope you'll be hearing something from Rich, cowboy poetry coming up at a time when you least suspect. We've had you perform at, if you will, at the end of a mass and
Sunset Fest.
Fest. So
yeah.
we'll be back. But thanks, Rich, and everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. In the meantime, say your prayers. Be well. God bless. Take care.
Thank you all.